I welcome all. Good morning, good afternoon, and evening to depending on wherever you are joining from. My name is Praful from Corrosion Radar, and your host for CUI or Coffee, which is aimed at promoting online discussions within integrity community to exchange experiences and ideas. I'm pleased to welcome our guest today, Hurt Hank from Stork and World Class Maintenance. Hi, Hurt Hank.
Hi, Praful. Thank you for the introduction. Nice to be on the floor.
Thank you. And, I believe you're joining from The Hague today, from the Netherlands. How's the
Yeah,
weather there?
the weather is very good. It has been already very good since the couple of weeks. So every day enjoyable to go outside. Also, of course, with the COVID restrictions that we have down here. But nevertheless, it's enjoyable.
Great. So, Hurt,
Yeah.
can you have a few words of introductions from yourself for the audience before going forward?
Yeah, sure. So I'm working with Stork Asset Management Technology as a principal consultant, and my main occupations with Stork are risk-based inspection, compliance, and long-term asset replacement. So these three form a kind of a three pots on which you can organize your asset management. And doing that since 2006, one of my activities is corrosion and insulation, for which I have been involved with the World Class Maintenance Consortium. So that's actually one of the reasons that we made contact. And I'm happy to be today in the presentation. So thanks for that, Praful.
So pleased to have you here. So it's great to it's a great topic today, which is the digital ready turnaround and CUI management, and especially now when we are talking about remote working and people are postponing turnarounds. Your expertise and experiences from what you're seeing in Netherlands and Europe in general, it will be valuable. So I'm looking forward to that insights about turnarounds and CUI. So just for the audience, this is how we will spend the next 1 hour.
Mm-hmm.
We'll spend about 25 minutes, half an hour in the panel discussions with Hurt Hank, and we'll have a few polls in between for the audience, and we'll discuss the outcomes of that. Our intention is to keep at a high level, discussions right in the beginning, but we will go details and deeper during the question answer sessions. During the question answer sessions, we'll also pass on the mic to few interesting attendees who have few interesting questions. And if you have that intention of speaking and contributing, just raise your hand so that our moderators will know that you have something to contribute. And maybe if you have time, we can pass on the mic to you. So without further ado, let's have our coffee or hot drink or masala tea in India, as we call mate, kahwa in Middle East. So corrosion and insulation have been a major issue. We are still talking about it even after several decades. So we have been running these sessions. We have a global audience as always, even today. And there have been one theme which is being repeated, that can we use digital tools, predictive tools, and also now in these circumstances, there's a turnarounds. I see a lot of turnarounds being postponed because of situations, budgets, as well as remote working. So what are your opening thoughts, Hurt, in this era of digital ready turnarounds? What it means to you?
Well, in general, what we see, of course, is that right now there is a tendency to delay turnarounds because of all the uncertainties that there are with the COVID-19 issue. And based on that, you see that especially the smaller companies, they tend to be afraid that they will get squeezed between the delayed turnarounds of the bigger companies. So that's an argument for them to continue it. Actually, we just recently had a specific webinar on delaying turnarounds. But in relationship to CUI management, then you see what's also you see in general, that if you delay something, if you want to change something, you come to the issue of, okay, what do I actually know about my assets? To what extent do I actually need to do something during the turnaround? Maybe I can shift something to smaller turnarounds, or especially with CUI related matters. is there in any matter a necessity to do it in a turnaround? So for that reason, it's all about information, having readily available the information onto what is really necessary, to what extent do I have risks. And actually this then triggers a bit the issue of having all this information digitally available, kind of a digital twin issue, you could say. So if you then look at it as having all the info there, so then you can easily decide on that. So I think that's actually a very interesting matter, the topic for today, to have all that info readily available and decide on that.
Great. I believe you have a few slides which you want to share the insights as to how people can manage it.
Yeah, so that is in general a bit like, okay, how do you manage the scope of a turnaround? And particularly you can then envisage these slides also to see what it then means also for the scope of all the CUI related activities. So if you could just show me some of these.
So that's great. So next few minutes, let's hear from your slides as to what are the insights we are getting. So can we have the slides from Hert on shared, please?
Yeah. So actually what you see here is that the whole shutdown management and deciding on what to do and what not to do, it's like a funnel. So what you actually see is that there are some steps where you start with what is the project, which tasks there are, and then the first thing that you look at is it actually what is the actually required minimum to do it. So that's then step first. Maybe you can click because it is an animated sheet. So step first is what is actually absolutely necessary. Oh, now you clicked a bit too much, so there is some delay on that one, but no problem. So first step, what's the core of the requirements? Then the second step is, are there possibilities to do it by other means, like on-stream techniques, other technical means, or maybe if there needs to be something cleaned, chemical cleaning. And the third question is, can I do things which need to be done by means of a turnaround outside of the turnaround? And then the final step is everything which then needs to be done in the turnarounds, when talking, for instance, about CUI, those items which are that deteriorated that they need immediate replacements, then those become part of the scope, and then actually you start with the scope freeze. So it's more about minimizing the total scope than trying to do everything what you would like to do in a turnaround, getting it all together as a general thing. So this is actually the first thing, treating it as a funnel, and then the second thing is getting all the info that you require in order to decide for this turnaround in a digitally available, and that's what this picture, actually this slide actually shows. The first is get the information readily available by digital means. So get in one guy instead of everybody, having a look and make sure that all this info is available. So this is actually what you could see as creating a digital twin of the actual plant down there, kind of a Google Street View, but then for the installation. And having all this info readily available, not by means of all the spreadsheets like we had it in the past, but now by means of a common platform. Everybody is available, can join during these webinars or these web meetings, can have their inputs, so it's much more efficiently. And then if you have all this organized, and then the final step is that you can organize your whole project from beginning to start based on all these centralized info. And actually, this is the core of managing your turnarounds in general, and related to CUI management, CUI deterioration in particular, because it's also about information. Where are the hotspots where you expect problems? How are they defined? What do I need to do? Do I need to do it in the turnaround or or outside of the turnaround? All that info also needs to be readily available. And it goes really rather deep, because you would also like to have, of course, info about what's the process conditions, What type of insulations do I have? Is it coated, yes or no? So actually, these were then all the type of info that we then have used, and based on that, we then have also been able to work together in this world-class maintenance project. So maybe you can then show this third slide, and because that then shows actually how this then works. Because you have all these potential alternative inspection methods which you then can apply, and those which are effective you might then use during the shutdown, and those which you can do outside of the shutdown by means of other techniques, those are also very well applicable. So in the world-class maintenance project, we then just focus then on deciding, okay, if you then look at the assets, what do you really need to do, and how effective are the, for instance, NDT methodologies which you then apply. So it's all getting the info readily available and deciding then on based on risk criterions what there actually is. So if we then talk about okay, what is then the impacts and how useful is all this digitized info? Some people might say, well, we have our proven methods from the past, but there's some very nice examples which can show you the added value of using these new techniques. And actually, a colleague of mine, Peter Katz, he has recently, it's not recently, it's already I think a couple of years ago, done it. And, so maybe you can ask him. I think he has also joined. Maybe you can ask him about his experiences.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. That was very insightful, Kurt. And I believe Peter Cat, your colleague, is also on the line. So can we first launch a first poll? This is the time for the first poll. And in parallel, I'll ask the moderator to give mic to Peter, and we'll speak while the poll is ongoing. So while Peter is coming on board, here's the first question to the audience. I would request all the audience to select the right their opinions. The first question is, how has your organization turnaround plans been affected by COVID-19? Is it unaffected, or is it postponed? By how much? The second question is, which option describes your industry best? Oil and gas, petrochemicals, etc. And this is also geographical region, the third question, mainly from the context of relating it, whether different geographies are responding differently. So we have Peter on the line while audience is answering the polls. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Priful. Thank you. Thank you,
Your
Henk.
voice, mic is a bit low, Peter. Can you speak a bit louder, please?
Is this better?
Yeah, so okay, we can hear you. All right. So I know, Peter, you have been involved with remote inspection, especially, all these innovations around drones. How far have they come up with? Are they practical now? Are they useful? They're proving their worth. What's your experience on this?
Yes, absolutely. Drones have come a very long way, and there are a lot of specialized tools available for a vast majority of inspections. Most drones can be used for visual inspections, but nowadays you can also do wall thickness measurements with drones. We also use the visual images we capture to put it in a 3D model. So clients can use the 3D model to prepare their work or to evaluate the scope performed.
Right. So thank you, Peter. And how can these tools, especially the remote and drones, all these tools can be useful in turnarounds? Can they reduce the turnaround scope or make it faster?
Yes, the turnaround time, the scope can be reduced because you can prevent building scaffolding, which is usually very time-consuming and costly event. You can do it with less people on site. Uh, so yeah, it has huge benefits in both cost as in the current environment with COVID, the risks to have less people on site.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for joining us. And I really take it from here that the drones and remote inspection tools have really come of age, and they are now practical in using in the field. Thank you, Peter, for joining us.
Thank you.
So coming back to the audience, um, uh, last few seconds for the audience to vote again, select the right options before we reveal the results. So let's see the results now. I believe most of the audience have responded. That's great. So let's see the results. The first question was, how was your organization? How has your organization been affected by COVID-19? 24% feel unaffected. Great. 60% around thinks reduced and prioritized scope, which is the reality. And 18% feel they have postponed the turnarounds by less than 12 months. Interestingly, 0% by more than 12 months. So majority, I think here 75% or 76% say that there's a reduced scope and postponement in the turnarounds, which is now the new reality. But the postponed turnarounds are less than 12 months. Again, second question is, where are our audience joining from? So majority from upstream oil and gas, few from downstream oil and gas, few from chemicals, and others as well. So oil and gas focus, and a few people from chemical. Geography, a lot of people from Asia Pacific, 20% around. Europe and Russia, 35. Middle East, 30%, which has greatly increased. And I think Americas are even 18%. So I think we have a global audience thinking the same, that a global audience from oil and gas mainly, and saying that our scope have reduced because of these issues and turnarounds have been postponed. 76% of the audience feels that way. Hank, what do you think of this poll? Do you see the same thing and response in Europe as well?
Yeah, I think what you see here, that reconsidering and re-evaluating the total scope of the shutdown and the turnarounds, that it's really the issue. And everybody also needs to do it because of legislative requirements. So everybody is heavily involved in, okay, can I still do it like I used to do? And if not, what are the other means? And in that sense, it is also really an opportunity to look at the way you were doing it, and also of the necessity to do what you were doing. And so I think in general, it's also a good chance to get to more effective approaches, and having available all these new techniques, and use them for your benefit in a way like what Peter Katz just told, doing less and having the same type of information, like in that case what he mentions actually for boiler inspection. So instead of having to build these huge scaffolds, you just send in the drone, and that gets the picture. You get this digital mapping, and then you can easily see what are the difference and where do I really need to go, and also look at the as yet uninvested corners. Previously you didn't go, and now you can go there and you can detect issues which otherwise still would have been hidden. There is this opportunity to do the job more effectively, more efficiently, without jeopardizing the total risks. Actually, you do the job better. So I think that's quite good.
So it's great to hear that it's a universal theme, I think, right from Americas to Asia, and
certainly
that's also true in Europe, and that's your observation as well. So that turnarounds are being postponed, and people need to respond. And this brings me to part 2 of our discussion. Is this an opportunity, or is this a barrier is there there's an opportunity here in delaying the turnarounds to incorporate some of the new practices, new technologies, especially around the digital concepts which are bringing value here for the next turnaround. Say we incorporate something in this turnaround so that the next turnaround is even better or even smaller, a small scope. So I will ask you, Kurt, what are the opportunities which you think, and examples of that possibly, as to what are the opportunities in this postponement of turnarounds. Meanwhile, I will launch poll 2. While the audience is answering that, we can continue discussion. So may I request launching of poll 2 for the audience. So this is a question for the audience. Which aspect of CUI management process is most challenging and costly during turnarounds? Let's see what the audience says. Please select. So meanwhile, Hank, what do you think are the opportunities in general about turnaround postponements, and what should we think?
Yeah, well, I think the postponement in itself, it gives you the necessity and also the opportunity to really get to the core of what you need to do, and for that, there's then also this barrier. You need to get the involvement of the people, so they need to be confident that they don't get into a kind of a fake digital world, but that it's actually the information which you need, and which has a core position, and to be very clear about the quality of that information that you require. That's then the main thing. But also when we talk about rather subjects which are in general seen as rather hard to manage, like corrosion under insulation, I think the main issue there is get your information available, know how fast it can deteriorate, know also what if it deteriorates, what are effective techniques and which aren't. And that's actually then something that we worked on with the world-class maintenance, which you also introduced me with this project. It's all about taking then all this information, putting it together, and so that's then I think very helpful when doing the turnarounds. And of course, you need then to manage the barrier of the involvement of some people also. But then there is this, I think I'm quite convinced that if you look at the whole inspection process in general, it's actually more an information process. Get the right information, know what to do with it. So it's getting the data, interpret data, making it to information, decide based on that. And of course, risk analysis plays an important role in that one, because by means of the risk analysis, you are capable of making the balance between, on one side, the cost for inspection, and on the other side, the reduction in the probability of failure, so that actually the risks of failure of a specific item. So, and that's then, of course, what is the essence of asset management. Finding the right balance and doing what is required.
Okay, so so it's an opportunity of incorporating new technologies, especially around, how can we make the future turnarounds even more efficient and better. So do you have? I believe world-class maintenance have been working on a similar concept,
Yes.
especially in Netherlands, and then they've come up with RBI practices which can be incorporated even in these turnarounds, and new technologies are being proposed in that. I believe you have a slide on that, right?
Yes, please. Yeah, if you
Okay,
you can show that one.
Can we have slide
we don't
on that?
We don't have the time to go into detail, because then, of course, we don't have time to ask or to answer any questions. But I can just give you an overview about what we really have been done.
Yeah.
So actually, what you see here, it's a kind of the building blocks. It's a kind of what we developed was a modular approach, so that everybody who has already an ongoing process, he or she can take out of the approach what they require. And actually, there were then two working groups who especially paid attention to particular issues. It were the green blocks. If you then click, they will pop up. It's what was the work group on NDT effectivity. So just hit the space bar and then it should continue. And then you see those were focused onto life cycle costing and the effectivity of NDT techniques, which is also, of course, an important part of the risk management. And there was then this other working group, which then was dedicated onto developing actually a lifetime expectation for applied coatings. And all this is then integrated in an overall framework of the risk analysis, the management approaches, and all this is readily available without any costs for those who are interested. It's currently in Dutch, but of course with Google Translate you could also get it in the English language, or I will even be willing to translate it for you if that's necessary. But anyway, it's broadly applicable, and these building blocks, I think it makes it very strong. So it can be very helpful to manage your assets with new techniques. And also this is also about information management. What are the process conditions? What's the temperature? What's the condition of the insulation? That's the second block on the top. It's about classifying the condition of the insulation, also being an important parameter. So I think that's enough now for the overview. Those
Yeah,
interested.
great. So I think it's a great information about developments done by world-class maintenance in Netherlands, but it is globally applicable. And
sure. Yeah. It's
so
based
let's.
on based on the high level, the ISO high level structure. So based on that, you can apply it everywhere what you want. Even if you have already an approach ongoing, just mirror your approach on this approach, and then you can probably find some weak spots.
Yeah.
And based on that, develop.
So that's a great guideline, which people again can refer. I mean, it's a great information for the audience that this guideline from WCM in Netherlands is applicable globally. They can pick and choose. It's simplified, but it's also futuristic, incorporating some new thought processes around monitoring and digitalization as well. So let's see what the audience are saying on the poll 2. Which aspect of CUI management process is most challenging and costly? Scaffolding, people feel 20%. Insulation removal, 30% of the people, rightly so. Repair work, 20%. NDT and inspection, 25%. Data and report is 5%. So I think it's a spread audience. The cost people feel, depending on the geography, of course, but it's a spread out activities: scaffolding, insulation, repair, and NDT. What do you feel? What do you feel of this, Hurt, from the audience?
Yeah, I think it is quite recognizable, and you see, for instance, the people that vote for insulation removal, it's most costly. Probably these are also the people which don't have the insulation on very high spots, because normally if you have a lot of scaffolding, then that's a real cost driver. And those who vote for NDT and inspection, I know from our developed best practice that normally NDT and inspection is only partly 10% of the total costs. But this is actually, of course, a trigger in many cases. But so that then you can say, well, this is the driver for other related costs.
So, which means when we talk about CUI management and turnarounds and opportunities to do better things, there are these 4 or 5 aspects which are, there are opportunities to improve those: scaffolding or insulation, scoping, and NDT processes. But what are the barriers? What is the biggest barrier to address bringing in new technologies to address any of those? What do you feel, Hart?
Well, I think a barrier is that the importance of what you see here, only 5% see data and report preparation as a key issue. I think it's a huge underestimation, because what you often see is that people tend to cover the CUI issue like, okay, it's a problem. I have had some failures. Now I need to do something, get a big budget, make sure that this budget is part of a huge turnaround, so it doesn't pop up too much. And it's a bit covered by the whole budget of a turnaround, which is huge in many cases as well. And then we do a lot of stuff. We take everything which might be a risk, and it's off the shelf for a long time, and then after 10 to 15 years, we will see again. But that's not actually smart management of the insulation, I think. So if you focus more onto data and actually on what is really required, so then you are more on top of the CUI risk, and you are capable of doing what is required more easy and actually more in time before it becomes a problem. So
right.
in terms of risk management, you are more proactive rather than reactive. And I think currently the CUI approach is still, in general, I'm not speaking about all companies, of course, but in general, it is rather reactive. And
So that's a great point about CUI being more reactive right now. It needs to be more proactive, and that's the future, and that's what WCM is also proposing in their guidelines, which is great. That brings me to the part 3 and the poll 3 of this discussion, which specifically talks about CUI as to what are the opportunities during these turnaround postponements in general. What are the opportunities, especially for CUI? Before we actually jump on to that discussion, we have a special invitee audience member, Rich Midgley from Lloyd's Register, who have been asking about, we don't see enough being done to leverage advancements in digital condition monitoring to enhance risk-based approaches and models. How can this be? How can we improve education in this area about condition monitoring and digitalization? So can we pass on the mic to Rich Midgley from Lloyd's Register, please? And we'll ask the question to the panel to Herd. But what are your points, Rich? What are your observations from the Lloyd's Register and on these aspects?
Well, yeah, I think you mentioned that. Hopefully, you can hear me. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, yeah, we can hear you. And welcome to this panel session. And thanks for coming on board and contributing. So over to you, Rich.
Yeah. Well, firstly, thank you very much, Shagid. It's been very informative so far. So thank you for that. And yeah, moving from sort of reactionary maintenance to proactive maintenance. At Lloyd's at the moment, we don't see enough really being done to leverage advancements, as we said, in the digital condition-based monitoring piece, basically to enhance our risk-based approaches and models. And I guess how we see in the industry today, educate and make aware of this approach. So I guess that's my question. How do we improve the education in this area?
Great, thanks, Rich, and thanks for joining on board. I will pass the ball to Herd on this aspect as to how do we make education around condition monitoring. Meanwhile, can I ask? There's a poll number 3, and can I ask audience to select the right options from and then share their opinions. So while the audience is answering that, Herd, what do you think of Rich's point of view about and the question?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, of course. If people are unaware about possibilities, they won't use the possibilities. Unknown is unloved is a saying in the Netherlands. Maybe you have it in the UK as well. But so it means that in general, of course, if there are new techniques, especially if they have capabilities, then you should assess them, evaluate them, and actually if they have good capabilities, these should be proved and made commonly available so that everybody can enjoy the benefits. And that's actually one of the things that we also have done in this world-class maintenance project. There we have assessed some commonly available techniques. It was not yet about the new techniques. That's in the second part, which we hope to work in the future. But they're based on commonly available knowledge. These were assessed, and what you then see is that actually there is not a single solution which works in all situations. So depending on the problem, you need a specific technique. And if you then go to that level of knowledge, then you then see that actually there are good capabilities to cover the related problems. And but it's like going to the doctor. There's not a general pill that works for everything. You need to know what your problem is. Is it CUI on the supports, or is it generic CUI? And depending on the problem, then you can get an adequate solution. And all these people who then say, "Well, this doesn't work." Yeah, the question is, well, what was your problem? And of course, if I have an headache, some football won't help. That's.
It's a great point that it's a question of awareness, and people are not giving due importance to these aspects, and education about new technologies are being made available, but the education of that is still an issue, which is actually, I have to say, even CUI or coffee, this session is all about bringing together minds and then share the knowledge, experiences globally. And I think with this, people are getting some triggers, I hope, about what is out there, what are the better ways. Um, may I remind audience to select, again, look at the poll and select the right question, right answer before we actually release the response. Few more seconds. And meanwhile, I'll ask Rich again, Richard, in your mind, what do you think is the barrier, about this bringing new technologies of condition monitoring and digitalization to CUI in your mind?
I think he picked on it quite well there. It's sort of exploring the marketplace, making people aware and educating them, and listening to their problems. And I guess it's not one solution fits all. You've got to come together, with the solution, the service, the applications that are applicable to them, whether that's digital, whether it's physical, and bring that all together to optimize and create the value for them. It was a great answer from Geet. So that helped me a lot. So thank you.
Thank you, Rich, for joining us. And it's a great point you made that there's no universal solution. It's a tool set, a lot of tools available, but we need to pick the right tools. For that, awareness is important and education is important. Thank you, Rich, for joining us today and asking questions. So coming back to the poll, thank you. Coming back to the poll, can we have the response of the audience, please, on this? So the question was, which of the following would you like to know more about to help reduce future turnaround events? And that goes back to awareness question. 53%, majority think extend the use of digital monitoring. And, exciting to see that people are curious about and want to use digital monitoring. Overwhelmingly, more than 50%. Adopt a digital twin. Probably people are not aware of digital twins. 0%. Use of more NDT and inspection techniques. 16%. And use of more advanced insulation and coatings, which is 32%. Prevention is better than cure, but are we there yet is a question mark in terms of coatings and the cost effectiveness, etc. So it's very clear the audience is saying that we need more digital monitoring tools, and they can be incorporated in these turnarounds. So this brings me to the last question, Hank, about focusing on CUI management. How can we make a positive impact and a change? What are we currently doing? And with that point of view, how can we do it with these turnarounds? Your closing thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I think what the poll also results is or shows is that that there is an urgency to monitor. That's what people ask for. Monitoring means trend analysis, means making comparison, means standardization in what is the condition now, what is the condition in the future, so that you can really do trends. So then in relationship with CUI, I think that what it shows that CUI doesn't need to be an assassin as long as you keep your asset-related information up to date and you have a clear risk-based decision approach. And if you have that, you can minimize the CUI-related risk, any risk actually, for related to your assets, and manage that risk proactively rather than correctively. And that actually helps you then to save costs. CUI is a huge cost driver actually. So if you are keen on your budget, make sure you manage that budget and do it actually so by means of intelligent approaches like what we currently have.
So great. So I think there are opportunities to bring in risk-based inspection if they are not using already, to jump onto that and reduce the scope, optimize. But at the same time, there's an opportunity to bring in new digital tools, especially around monitoring and logging the data, to enhance those risk-based inspection procedures. One of the examples is moisture and water information, which if it is not present, the risks are low, but if it is present, the risks are high. So kind of that's an example of how digital tools or monitoring tools can be used. So Hert, thank you for your inputs and comments. They were quite insightful, and your presentation was quite insightful as well. It appears definitely there is a scope of, it's clear that there's a postponed turnarounds with rescoping exercises, and there's a scope for innovation, or there's a scope for bringing in new technologies, especially when turnarounds have been postponed. It gives more time to think about and plan about, okay, can we incorporate new technologies, new practices? So thank you for that. And this brings me to the second part of our discussions. We are running slightly over time, so we'll have a shorter Q&A session. So let's move to the question and answers. I will read out a few questions which are coming in. We'll pass on the mic to some of them and read out to some of them. So the first question, which is coming from Middle East, is turnaround delays constitute a very significant portion of the total delay. The causes are many, including tight scheduling and technical problems. Which inspection scopes can be reduced during turnarounds related to CUI management? I think it's a bit broader question, but Hert, I guess the question is tight schedules, technical problems. How can we prioritize what to reduce in CUI management in turnarounds?
Yeah, I think in general, the idea about CUI and coating, insulation is that there is this conflict between quality assurance, applying the CUI, the insulation rights, getting the coating to harden, to apply it, and turnarounds in general. That turnarounds, there's always this tendency to keep it as short as possible. There are lots of people on site. Everybody's doing their own business. Moisture flows everywhere. So one thing to do, and having your insulation and coatings and insulation put on the right way, it's actually not really something you would like to do during the normal turnaround. So in general, the message is, if you have CUI related issues, try to do it outside of a major turnaround, organize it separately. And the second thing is, if you have CUI related problems, decide where they probably, what are the hotspots, focus on the hotspots instead of having a generic approach and actually do far too much than what actually would need to be done in a turnaround.
I think it's about because CUI is about external surface, which does not need access to inside the surface, which means you need not shut down the unit. So it's best to do it CUI inspections and management outside the turnaround, so that the turnaround is more focused. And also, as you mentioned, it needs to be laser focused in the sense of focus on the hotspots of CUI rather than widespread. So risk-based inspections comes handy there. And also, I believe, from monitoring purpose, monitoring angle, the digital tools and sensors comes in handy there to focus where to inspect, identifying the hotspots.
Yeah, sure. If you have tools which have been proven to be effective, so if you would then have very risky items that normally would require a lot of effort, but you can prove that you can detect actually moisture effectively for those items, and then you just have your sensor, and the sensor tells, well, nothing is going on. It's still rock solid, and no corrosion can take place. Well, here's the benefit: no costs. So then all this scaffolding and all this attention is not necessary. So it's like looking at this as a process and finding the key to lock the process in a safe way, mitigating thereby all these risks. And it can, of course, influence the scope of the shutdown to a huge effect. And not to mention, of course, the risks, where it's all about, of course.
Great. So let's move to the next question, which is again from Middle East, and they're asking, can we utilize the drones for equipment internal inspections? I guess this is about inside the vessels or inside confined spaces. Can we use drones? What is the maturity of that? Hank, Hank, quick answer on that.
Well, I know that's depending, of course, on the size of the asset. You can use drones, like what Peter Kat already told. We have within Stork experience that we use drones to inspect insulated boilers. So, and actually, the technology is developed that far that currently you can also get the UT sensors related to the drone, which go through a path. And I recently saw some applications like EMUA 159 inspections. So according to this requirement that this was done also by means of drones in huge storage vessels. So actually, if there is an opportunity, then it's yeah, you can do a lot. And what of course is helpful for this development is that companies like Dow. Sorry, yeah.
So I gather, you know, the drones for internal vessel inspections are available now.
They are available, and they fit very nicely into the strategy of some companies like Dow, who say we don't want any people to go in a vessel unless there is no other possibility, or there are other possibilities. And for that, you can use these drones. And of course, then you have the digital image. You can better compare because you have all these images that you can put on each other. You can do the digital mapping, like what my colleague told. So then you get a even higher confidence and better detectability than what you had in the past, when it was all depending on visual interpretation. Not to say that that's not good, but now it's more traceable.
Yeah,
and that's the good thing.
Good. So yeah, so the next question is, which inspection scopes can be reduced during turnarounds related to CUI management? I think partly we have answered this, that as best as possible, can we take out CUI management outside of the turnaround scope, because this does not need necessarily the shutdown of the instrument equipments. So best is done outside of turnarounds. But even if the inspection is needed during a turnaround, I would think if there's, how can we know that there's no inspection needed? This pipe is good, you know, or this pipe is, of course, high risk, but not, it does not have suffered damage. Kurt, do you think any tool like water detection, etc., can be useful here to reduce the?
Sure, water detection can help, especially if we're talking about critical piping. Then it's of course you need to be sure. You need to have a high confidence that nothing happens. So then all these aspects play a role. Like, is it coated, yes or no? What type of material is it? Is it stainless steel, carbon steel? What is the age? What's the temperature? And what actually also what's the condition of the insulation, and if you have all those parameters present, then you can determine, okay, is there a risk, and if there is then a clear risk, then you need to investigate, of course, what that risk is, and depending on the problem that you then have, you can rely on long-range UT or on-stream radiography, or it's very critical and there's too much. And in the end, of course, stripping and having the visual inspections is the old-fashioned way, which of course still has most confidence with people, but there are a lot of techniques that you can also apply. And it's all depending on what is the situation, and that determines the necessity to look there. So if you have a good regime, and you are really on top of the condition of your assets, and you know you can make sure that there is absolutely no moisture present. Also by means of infrared control, stuff like that. Then of course you can have the proof is readily available, and then the risk is covered sufficiently. So I would refer actually then to the approach that we develop within the WCM. And if people say, well, there are some gaps in that, please tell. So then we can learn from each other, and we can make it actually to the level that's required to to get this problem really covered, because that's what we want, to make sure that everybody is on the right page.
Actually, there's a question coming in from North America. It says, how does world-class maintenance differentiate itself from other industry bodies, or should it differentiate itself? So I think the question is about, differentiation. Is it only for Netherlands, or how does it differentiate? Gert, what do you think of this world-class maintenance question?
Yeah, well, it's a Dutch organization, but like what the name in itself says, the focus is not limited to the Netherlands, because with what is it's actually an initiative supported by many international companies. So it's not really a company in itself. It's more a network organization. And being a network organization, we of course, there are lots of international companies involved, like Borealis, Dow, Shell, etc. So what has been developed down there, and what will be developed down there, should also be applicable by all these organizations worldwide. So yeah, it's not specifically for the Dutch market. It's what was developed down there should be applicable in general, like what I just said. It's for that reason also that we adopted the ISO high-level structure as a framework to set up this best practice for risk-based CUI management. And it should be a broad approach. CUI is not something typical for the Netherlands. You have it in the UK. We have it everywhere. So better develop something which is
right.
applicable.
CUI is a global issue, and it's also apparent from our audience that right from Americas to Latin America to Asia, Middle East, Europe. Yeah,
so we also have taken the initiative to work together with the EFC 55 organization. So based on that, we also want to develop this to a broader and more widely applied approach. So it should be ideally it's worldwide available, and everybody can benefit from it.
Great. So I think world-class maintenance have been trying to be innovative about bringing the new thought processes very quickly, and I think it's an opportunity for the audience to go through the document. I believe it is available on the web, the documents about RBI and NDT practices for CUI.
Yeah, it's all there, and there's also a PowerPoint to familiarize your organization with. Okay, you start getting to the higher level and treating CUI management really as not a single thing that you do once, but it is on a continuous base. What does that involve? It's not something for maintenance only. It's something for management. So it's all there. It's all integrated in this best practice with spreadsheets and stuff like that, so that you can use it. And so if people want it, they can get it. And well, of course, be my guest.
Great. There's a practical question coming in. In fact, I'll combine two questions. So the first one is, with rescheduled turnaround, how much time is enough to change an original scope? So you talked about changing the scope, rescoping, prioritization, but how much time is enough? Is it months, weeks, days? And the second question is, what are the top 3 activities in scoping a turnaround? I think they're kind of related, and prioritization. So how much time is enough, Gert?
Well, I think what we see, which is enough, it's also, of course, like how much time do you give to people, and they need to do it in that time, and base the loads on the available time. But what we see that is in 3 months you can do a lot. So if you, for instance, shift it over 6 months, then you can do the reassessment in 3 months in general. Of course, it depends largely. Okay, what is the size of the scope? And also, to what extent is it prepared? Is it all standard packages? And do you need a lot of communications also with the contractors? These are really the more difficult things. I'm now just talking about administrative reorganization of the scope of the shutdown. But I think the major thing, of course, is having all these contacts with your contractors and making sure that everybody is aligned. And that, of course, also calls then for major contractor, for instance, who can do it all and organize it for you and make sure that that everybody is aligned. And but yeah, in that question, I think 3 months you should be able to do if it's well organized, of course.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So I think I mean there have been so many other questions. We have limited time. We can't answer all of them. So we will probably answer it offline on emails, all the questions from the audience. But here's the last comment and question, which is building on the subject of digital monitoring to reduce the turnaround times. How can we spend more time on the topic with some industry leaders, probably in a future session or future meetings? Is there an opportunity for WCM to work with, say, leaders, Stork, Lloyd's Register, and even NACE, EFC? What is your thought on that, Gert? How can the body come, various leaders and different bodies come together? Is there a forum, or is there a forum to be created?
I'm not aware that there is a forum on digital monitoring. I've worked in the past on the subject monitoring itself. What is monitoring, and actually what is rational monitoring? So that's an issue in itself, a topic, because monitoring is a kind of a container word. Everybody has its own image, and actually what we then see, we have also worked in world-class maintenance framework on that one. What is then monitoring, and how do you do it based on a rationale? And I think if people are interested, and especially like people from Lloyd's, of course, they can also always join the world-class maintenance initiative and aggregate there. And people I would really invite people to send questions that they have, urgencies that they have, that they feel to us, and yeah, maybe we can, if it's clear that there is support for that, and that many people have a problem with it. Of course, we can then develop the initiative to improve on that one.
So what I see is, I think this is a broader question, not only monitoring, but also digitalization of the CUI management procedures. RBI is a good starting point to reduce the scope and prioritize, but can we bring efficiencies in terms of digital technologies? Monitoring is one angle, but also data storage, data standardization, data access, retrieval, even as simple as how can we digitize the visual inspection process, you know, and you have covered that in your slides, heard that there's a need for moving beyond Excel sheets and folders to actually more you know, well-defined databases structures for not only now, but also for the future. Because I think it is also apparent from the past sessions in CUI Coffee that there's unstructured data, which is a hindrance towards efficiency. So there's a need for structured data sets, and that's where digitalization comes into picture. Monitoring is one way of doing it, in the sense of, you know, logging the data from the field real time, but also, you know, the manual data collection should also be, you know, there's a digitalization scope there. So you know, I feel there's a lot of scope. So I think that's a great you know, session. I would say we are on the tail end of our session. I would like to just close and summarize on this, that turnarounds have been getting postponed, CUI have been getting affected, management, you know, but in general corrosion management as well. And as Gert have mentioned, that there's a procedure which can be followed to rescope a turnaround. It may take some time, few weeks, but it's worthwhile an exercise. CUI can be managed outside a turnaround. That's the best procedure, because, you know, you need not shut down a unit completely for that. So use the turnaround judiciously. And also, you know, there are various digital tools which are coming in. Digitalization of CUI is a big opportunity. World-class maintenance have been leading that, some of the efforts on the RBI and assessments and practices, and they have included some thoughts about inclusion of using monitoring and digital tools to great advantages. So with that comment, I would you know, thank all the audience, and thank Gert Henk for joining us today from Stork and sharing your views. Any closing comments, Gert?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to share the thoughts, and yeah, I'm also very happy with the kind of questions that were popped up. So yeah, what I already said, if people have any worries on, especially of course with CUI related aspects, please share it, and we can have a look at it and yeah, try to solve that problem. Maybe get some clues. Probably in many cases it's already solved, but it's just that people are not aware yet. And well, yeah, that's the main message, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, Hank. And to the audience, I hope you learned at least one key takeaway from this session, which will be a success. You know, if you can incorporate it in your day-to-day work and managing CUI. CUI or Coffee is one such effort to bring together thought leaders and share best practices across the globe. You know, we organize this bi-weekly. We will again meet in another 2 weeks' time. Look for the announcements on various social media channels, LinkedIn. Please follow Korosho Nidar to see the next announcements. And I hope these sessions are being useful for the community. Thank everyone. Thank you to the audience. Thank you, Hank, for joining us today. And have a great week ahead.